Okay, so, we're diving deep again, and this time you guys sent in some really fascinating stuff, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's a lot to unpack. We've got this detailed news report with all these proposed tariffs in the U.S., and then on top of that, uh, a whole set of discussion minutes.
Yeah.
It's about China's military exercises near Taiwan, what all the other countries are saying about it, and then some pretty high-level geopolitical analysis.
Hmm.
So our mission, I guess, is to sort through all of this, figure out what's really important, and try not to get lost in the weeds along the way.
Absolutely. I think the key here is seeing how all these things connect.
Yeah.
You've got these trade moves, you've got these military exercises, and they're not really separate events when you look at the big picture.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's some serious global dynamics going on underneath all of this.
Okay, so let's maybe start with the economic stuff first.
Sure.
This news report really lays out a pretty big move from the U.S. in terms of tariffs. Like, they're proposing to hit imports from a whole bunch of countries.
Right.
And it looks like the baseline is going to be at least 10%, across the board.
At least, yeah.
But it gets much higher for countries that have a big trade imbalance with the U.S.
Hmm.
And the numbers that really jump out at me are, 34% on goods from China,
Wow.
20% on stuff from the EU,
Oh, yeah.
and then up to 46% on imports from Vietnam.
Right.
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's significant for sure.
But then there's this weird thing where Canada and Mexico
Yeah.
they're getting a temporary exemption.
Mm.
But it seems like that's only because they agreed to roll back some of their own tariffs.
It does, yeah. It kind of makes you think about,
Yeah.
how secure those alliances really are.
Right. It seems pretty transactional.
Exactly. It's not just about, who your friends are.
Yeah.
It's about who's giving you what at any given moment.
It's kind of a worrying thought, actually.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so let's switch gears a bit.
And look at these discussion minutes now.
Okay.
They start off talking about Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to Russia.
Yeah.
And I think his statements there are really important for understanding how China sees the whole Taiwan issue.
Absolutely.
He spent a lot of time emphasizing the history and the legal basis for China's claim over Taiwan.
Right.
Like, he specifically mentioned the Cairo Declaration, the Potsdam Proclamation, and, Japan surrendering at the end of World War II. He's basically saying that these were all international agreements
Well,
recognizing China's sovereignty over Taiwan.
exactly. And I think what's really interesting here is that he's not just, looking back at history for the sake of it.
Right.
The discussion minutes make it clear that China sees the Taiwan issue as being directly tied to the legitimacy of the UN
Wow.
and the whole post-World War II international order.
So they're saying if you challenge our claim on Taiwan, you're challenging the entire system.
In a way, yeah, they're trying to frame it as a fundamental principle of international law, not just some regional dispute.
That's a really smart strategy, actually.
It is. It's very deliberate. They're trying to solidify their narrative on the global stage.
Okay, so this whole historical and legal argument seems to feed directly into the next big development.
Which is?
The announcement of this Strait 2025A military exercise.
Oh, yeah.
Senior Colonel Shi Yi gave all the details.
Okay.
Said it's happening in the central and southern Taiwan Strait.
Right.
And the objectives are like a laundry list.
Really?
They're talking about verifying threats, issuing warnings, expelling intruders,
Wow.
interceptions, seizures, testing their regional control, doing joint containment measures,
Uh-huh.
even honing precision strike capabilities.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to show that they can do everything.
Yeah, it's definitely a comprehensive statement of intent.
So what do you make of this Straight Thunder name?
Well, it definitely sounds,
Intense.
intense. Yeah, and that A designation, I think that's important too.
What do you think that means?
Well, the analysis in the discussion minute suggests that it means this is a swift exercise.
Okay.
Like, it could happen really quickly and maybe even unexpectedly.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying that A also indicates a high level of readiness.
So they're ready to go.
Basically, yeah, the analogy they use is the finger is already on the trigger.
Whoa.
So it's not just about showing off their capabilities, it's about showing that they're prepared to use them.
At a moment's notice.
Exactly.
That's a pretty scary thought.
It is, and I think that's the point.
You think they're trying to intimidate Taiwan?
I think they're trying to intimidate everyone.
Yeah, I guess.
It's a way of shifting the perception,
I was
It's no longer about a potential conflict in the future. It's
Yeah.
about something that could happen right now.
So it's a psychological game as much as a military one.
Absolutely.
Okay, so unsurprisingly, this exercise got a lot of attention from other countries.
I bet.
The U.S., the EU, and Japan, they all had something to say about it.
And what was the general response?
Well, according to Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun,
Okay.
these countries were basically saying that China shouldn't be using force or coercion to change the status quo.
Makes sense.
They accused China of making irresponsible and threatening moves. And Guo Jiakun's response was very firm.
What did he say?
He basically reiterated China's position that Taiwan is an internal affair.
Right.
And he condemned what he called Taiwan independence activities.
Right.
And any external support for those activities.
So he's blaming Taiwan and their allies for the instability.
Yeah, he's saying that those are the real threats to peace, not China's military exercises.
It's interesting how both sides see themselves as the ones defending peace.
It is. Yeah, it's like they're speaking different languages.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental disagreement about the whole situation.
Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into this Strait Thunder 2025A thing.
Sure.
The discussion minutes make a distinction between this and the combined sword exercises that China did before.
Okay, I remember those.
Those were seen as more of a demonstration of China's ability to take Taiwan.
Right, like they were showing they were ready.
Exactly.
But this is different.
Yeah, this Strait Thunder, with the speed and the A designation, it's being interpreted as more than just a demonstration.
Like they're actually starting the process.
Yeah, the minutes even call it a final ultimatum.
Wow, so it's a much more serious message.
That's how it's being perceived.
It makes you wonder if they're actually going to follow through.
Right. Are they just trying to scare everyone, or are they actually preparing to take Taiwan?
That's the big question, isn't it?
So what about the reactions from the EU and Japan specifically?
Yeah, what did they have to say?
Well, the minutes say that the EU kind of picked up the ball on the Taiwan issue after this exercise was announced.
Okay.
But they're being very cautious about it.
Really?
Yeah, it seems like they might be trying to use the situation as leverage in their dealings with China.
Interesting.
Especially because there are some big EU-China meetings coming up soon.
So they don't want to rock the boat too much.
Exactly. They're trying to play it smart.
Makes sense.
And then there's Japan.
Oh, yeah. Japan's in a tricky spot.
For sure, the minutes say their reaction is being driven by a few different things.
Like what?
Well, obviously there's pressure from the U.S.
Right. They're allies.
But there's also this internal political stuff going on.
Oh.
The minutes describe it as a last strategic gamble by Japan's far-right government.
That sounds risky.
Yeah. And then on top of that, they're really dependent on China economically.
Sure.
And they're still dealing with the fallout from the Fukushima disaster.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor.
So they're trying to walk a tightrope, you know?
They don't want to anger the U.S., but they also don't want to provoke China.
Exactly. And it's interesting that they seem to be avoiding the whole South China Sea issue right now.
Maybe they're trying to keep their powder dry.
Yeah, maybe they're just focusing on Taiwan for now.
It's a smart strategy to prioritize.
Okay, so what about Russia?
Ah, Russia.
The minutes suggest that they're kind of hesitant to get too involved in the Taiwan situation.
Really?
Yeah, they say Russia has the inclination but not the courage to do anything drastic.
Interesting.
And they compare it to Russia's reluctance to act on other issues that are sensitive for China,
Like what?
like Tibet, Xinjiang, Hong Kong.
Right.
So they're basically saying that Russia talks a big game, but they're not willing to put their money where their mouth is.
That's a pretty harsh assessment.
Yeah, and the minutes even suggest that the U.S. is disappointed by this.
How so?
They imply that the U.S. was hoping Russia would help them break the deadlock in South Asia.
So they wanted Russia to get more involved.
Exactly. They were hoping for more support.
But it seems like Russia has their own agenda.
Yeah, they're not just going to do what the U.S. wants.
So where does all of this leave us?
Well, the minutes identify this new international pattern.
Okay.
They call it cold politics and a hot economy.
What does that mean?
It means that there's still a lot of traditional security competition between the U.S. and Russia on one side and China and Europe on the other.
Okay, so that's the cold politics part.
Exactly. But at the same time, there's all this economic cooperation and engagement on non-traditional security issues.
So that's the hot economy.
Right. And they're saying this could lead to a major reshuffling of global relationships.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And they link it back to the Trump administration strategy of befriending distant states and attacking nearby ones.
Oh, yeah, with the tariffs and everything.
Exactly.
So it's like the U.S. is trying to create a new world order.
In a way, yeah.
But it's not clear if it's going to work.
That's for sure.
So what does this all mean for China specifically?
Well, the minutes say that the situation in the Taiwan Strait hasn't fundamentally changed.
Okay.
They see these recent military exercises as a response to Taiwan independence provocations.
Right.
But they also say that China has made some gains in its ability to unify Taiwan.
Especially militarily.
Exactly.
And what about the U.S.?
Well, they say that the U.S.'s influence on the Taiwan issue is waning.
Really?
Yeah, they point to the fact that Europe and Japan aren't really backing up their words with actions.
It's interesting.
They call it a temperature difference.
So they're saying there's a gap between what the U.S. wants and what its allies are willing to do.
Exactly.
That's got to be frustrating for the U.S.
I'm sure it is.
So overall, it sounds like China is coming out ahead in this.
That's the assessment. Yeah, they say the gains outweigh the losses.
Okay, so let's try to sum this all up for our listeners.
All right, so we've got the U.S. making these big tariff moves,
Right.
China taking a hard line on Taiwan and showing off its military might,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got the EU, Japan, and Russia all trying to figure out where they stand in all of this.
Yeah, it's a complex situation.
It really is, and I think the key takeaway is that the world is changing.
In what way?
Well, we're seeing this clash between the old way of doing things,
Cold politics.
right, and this new reality of economic interdependence.
The hot economy.
Exactly, and it's creating all sorts of new challenges and opportunities.
For everyone involved.
And it's not clear how it's all going to play out.
That's for sure.
So here's a question for you, our listener.
Okay.
What do you think this cold politics, hot economy dynamic means for the future of international relations?
Yeah. Is it going to lead to more cooperation or more conflict?
And could we see some unexpected alliances form as countries try to navigate this new landscape?
Those are some big questions.
They are, but they're worth thinking about.
Absolutely.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.
Bye.